The crushing weight of guilt has finally broken through every psychological defense mechanism the avoidant has spent years perfecting, and now they're spilling their entire emotional truth like a dam that's burst under too much pressure. All the feelings they've hidden, all the manipulation they've used, all the genuine love they've suppressed, everything is pouring out in desperate confessions, because keeping secrets feels more unbearable than the vulnerability of total honesty. The confession floodgates have opened. Years of suppressed emotions and hidden truths are flooding out of them in uncontrolled bursts of honesty that shock even them. They're admitting to every feeling they've denied, every manipulative tactic they've used, and every moment they chose fear over authenticity. The guilt has made keeping secrets feel more painful than the exposure they've always feared. This emotional purging isn't strategic or calculated. It's involuntary release of psychological pressure that's become too intense to contain. They're confessing things they never intended to reveal because the guilt of hiding their truth has become more unbearable than the vulnerability of complete transparency. The confessions include not just their feelings for you, but their awareness of how their behavior affected you, their recognition of their own patterns, and their understanding of the damage they've caused through their emotional cowardice. They're finally telling the whole truth about their internal experience. They're admitting their love was always real. The guilt has forced them to confess that their feelings for you were always genuine and intense, despite their behavior suggesting otherwise. They're finally admitting that their emotional distance wasn't evidence of lack of caring, but desperate attempts to manage feelings that felt too overwhelming to handle safely. These love confessions are particularly devastating because they reveal that every moment of coldness, every withdrawal, and every rejection was performed while they were actually feeling the opposite. They're admitting they loved you deeply while treating you poorly because their psychology couldn't handle the intensity of their genuine feelings. They're confessing that their emotional unavailability was never about not caring enough. It was about caring so much it terrified them into defensive behaviors that protected them from vulnerability while destroying their chances at the connection they actually wanted most. The manipulation admissions. Guilt has broken down their ability to maintain the illusion that their behavior was natural or unconscious, and they're now confessing to every calculated move they made to control relationship dynamics. They're admitting to strategic withdrawals, intentional mixed signals, and deliberate emotional withholding designed to keep you off balance. These manipulation confessions include acknowledging that they understood exactly what they were doing to you emotionally and chose to continue those patterns despite knowing the pain they were causing. They're admitting their behavior was often conscious choice rather than involuntary trauma response. They're confessing to using your love and patience against you, taking advantage of your understanding nature, and exploiting your willingness to accommodate their limitations while providing minimal reciprocal effort or emotional investment. The fear revelations. The guilt has forced them to reveal the specific fears that drove their avoidant behavior, exposing the psychological wounds and trauma responses they've hidden behind mysterious aloofness. They're confessing to being terrified of abandonment, overwhelmed by intimacy, and convinced they're unworthy of genuine love. These fear revelations show that their emotional distance wasn't strength or independence, but terror disguised as self-sufficiency. They're admitting that their entire persona was constructed to hide their vulnerability and need for the exact love they kept rejecting. They're confessing that their patterns weren't about not needing people, but about being too scared to need people safely. Their independence was performance designed to protect them from the vulnerability that genuine connection requires. The regret catalogue. Guilt has them cataloguing every moment they chose poorly, every opportunity they missed to love you better, and every time they prioritize their comfort over your emotional well-being. They're providing detailed accounts of their failures and missed opportunities for genuine connection. These regret confessions include specific incidents where they remember choosing fear over love, specific conversations where they could have been vulnerable but chose safety, and specific moments where they recognized your needs but chose their own comfort instead. They're admitting to remembering every hurt look on your face when they withdrew, every disappointed response when they chose distance, And every moment they could see they were damaging something beautiful but continued their destructive patterns anyway. The self-awareness admissions. The guilt has forced them to confess that they were always aware of their patterns and their impact on you, destroying the illusion that their behavior was unconscious or unintentional. They're admitting they knew exactly what they were doing and chose to continue anyway because change felt too scary. These self-awareness confessions reveal that their claims of being confused about their behavior or unaware of its effects were lies designed to avoid accountability. They're admitting they understood your needs, recognized their own limitations, and chose their comfort over your happiness repeatedly. They're confessing that they watched themselves destroy something beautiful while being fully conscious of what they were doing, which makes their behavior feel more cruel and deliberate than if it had been truly unconscious. The worth recognition confessions. Guilt has them finally admitting that they always knew you were too good for them, and that their behavior was driven by insecurity about their own worthiness rather than lack of appreciation for your value. They're confessing that they treated you poorly because they didn't believe they deserved to be treated well themselves. These worth confessions include admitting that they sabotaged the relationship because they expected it to fail anyway, that they pushed you away before you could leave them, and that they convinced themselves you would eventually realize you could do better. They're confessing that their emotional unavailability was often self-punishment based on their belief that they didn't deserve the love you were offering, which made accepting that love feel dangerous and impossible. The desperation revelations. The guilt has broken them down to the point where they're revealing their complete desperation to have you back, and their willingness to do anything to repair the damage they've caused. They're confessing that losing you has taught them everything they refused to learn while they had you. These desperation confessions include admitting that they've realized you were their best chance at genuine happiness, and that their fear-based choices have condemned them to a life of regret and loneliness they created for themselves. They're confessing that they would give anything to undo their patterns, that they understand now what they refused to understand then, and that their current suffering is justice for the suffering they caused you through their emotional cowardice. The complete emotional transparency. Guilt has stripped away every defense mechanism and forced them into complete emotional transparency, where they can no longer hide behind their usual protective facades. They're revealing their authentic emotional landscape without filters or strategic presentation. This transparency includes confessing their current mental state, their obsessive thoughts about you, their recognition of their own dysfunction, and their desperate hope that honesty might somehow create a path back to your good graces. The guilt has become so overwhelming that maintaining their emotional walls and keeping secrets feels more painful than the complete vulnerability they've always feared, forcing them to tell truths they never intended to reveal in desperate attempts to find relief from their psychological torture.